Every All Saints' Day morning, the town falls silent. The bells toll, prayers rise, but some souls are still waiting. Ethan Marsh thought he had buried his past. Daniel Price sought forgiveness. Yet in Ash Grove, no sin remains quiet, because here, even the dead still speak. For the first time in 15 years, I came back to Ash Grove. The town was almost unchanged. The same gas station, the same old church, the same quiet streets. But the air felt strange, too still, too heavy. That day was All Saints' Day. Every year, the townsfolk went to the cemetery to light candles for their loved ones. I never went, not until this year. Behind St. Mary's Church, the cemetery stretched silently across the hill. As I walked over the gravel path, my footsteps echoed louder than I expected. No wind, no birds, just me, and the crunch of stone beneath my feet. I walked between rows of flickering candles. Then, at the far end, I saw a gravestone that looked newer than the rest. Pure white, freshly carved. I stepped closer. My heart was pounding in my chest. The candle in front of the grave was still burning, even though no one else was around. And then, I saw the name engraved on the stone. Ethan Marsh, born in 1988, died November 1st, 2024. The flame trembled, and for a split second, I heard my own voice whisper,
"You're late."
That night, I stayed at the old motel on the edge of town. The yellow light on the ceiling flickered, and the walls smelled of damp and decay. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gravestone, my name on it, the trembling candle, and that whisper,
"You're late."
It was just past midnight when I heard a sound outside. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, right in front of my door. I looked through the curtain. No one was there. But at that exact moment, a cold wind slipped through the window, and with it came a voice, a whisper, faint, trembling, almost too quiet to hear.
Ethan.
My breath caught in my throat. I knew that voice. It was my brother, Daniel. But Daniel had died 16 years ago, and the morning of All Saints' Day. Because of me. I sank into the chair, covering my face with my hands. "I'm losing my mind," I muttered. But then the wind rose again, stronger, colder, and on the fogged glass of the window something was written.
"Did you forgive me?"
By morning, the fog had swallowed the entire town. As I stepped out of the motel, the church bells echoed faintly in the distance. The townsfolk were walking toward the cemetery, candles in hand, gathering, as they did every year, to honor their dead. But my steps, they led me somewhere else, into the woods, the same forest Daniel and I had snuck into all those years ago. There had been an accident that day, or maybe it hadn't been an accident at all. No one had gone there since. The trees had grown thick, the paths long forgotten. But I still knew the way. With every step, it felt like whispers were rising from beneath the soil. As I walked over the brittle leaves, they seemed to call me forward. Finally, I reached that small clearing, and there it was, the place where I had buried Daniel years ago. But something was different. The ground looked freshly dug, and above it stood a rusty wooden cross. On the cross hung a note.
"Everything ends where it began."
In that instant, the silence in the air shifted. The wind turned against itself, the trees groaned, and the earth began to move. The ground split open, first a faint tremor, then a deep, muffled rumble from the heart of the earth. I tried to step back, but my feet were trapped in the mud. And then, a hand rose from the soil, pale, decayed, but familiar. When I saw the scar between its fingers, my breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel.
"Why did you leave me there?"
whispered a voice, but it didn't come from the air. It came from inside my head. The trees around me bent, the wind died, and the cross toppled into the dirt. From the mud, a shape its eyes filled with the same rage and pain as that night.
Today is All Saints' Day.
The voice murmured thick and hollow.
The saints are remembered. Who remembers the sinners, Ethan?
My knees gave out beneath me. I tried to run, but the earth wouldn't let me go. The ground grew heavier, my lungs tighter. As Daniel stepped closer, his face decayed, flesh peeling, bones showing. He took another step, close enough to touch me. The last thing I saw was the moonlight hitting his face. And then I heard my own voice, low and broken. "Forgive me." Then everything fell silent, and that silence still echoes in my ears. They found me 3 days later in the woods, covered in mud, barely conscious. No one knew what I'd said or how I got there. The doctors called it a traumatic breakdown, but I haven't forgotten that night, because the silence is still with me. Since I came home, the wind doesn't sound the same. When I pass by the window, sometimes I see a shadow behind my reflection, and some nights a candle lights itself in my room. The flame flickers, and then I hear it. A whisper,
I forgive you, Ethan.
but that voice doesn't bring peace. If anything, with every word, it pulls me deeper. Every All Saints' Day morning, I visit the cemetery. Not Daniel's grave, mine. Yes, the stone is still there. My name, my birth year. And that day, only one thing has changed. There's another name carved beneath mine, small, faded, almost erased. Daniel Marsh. And ever since that day, the wind carries only one word: together. I've never told this story to anyone. For years, I stayed silent because no one would have believed me, but some nights I still hear it. That slow, deliberate knock on my door that morning, and every All Saints' Day, the memories come back, uninvited. My name is Daniel Price. In 2011, I was living in Ruston, a quiet town in northern Louisiana. I was 32, living alone, working as a teacher. Everything was ordinary, until the morning of November 1st. I hadn't slept well the night before. A thick fog hung over the town, and even as the sun rose, the air felt heavy and dark. At exactly 7:03 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Slow, deliberate. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard a whisper, almost from inside the walls. "Daniel, open the door." When I opened it, an elderly man stood there, dressed in a long black robe. His face was pale, his eyes almost milky white, and he held a folded piece of paper in his hands. "Mr. Price," he said, his voice calm and measured, "I've come to pray for you today." I was taken aback. "Excuse me, do we know each other?" I asked. He bowed slightly, extending the paper toward me. "I am Father O'Connor. On All Saints' Day, I visit each name on this list. Every year, the list is renewed. There were 10 names written on the paper. The last one was mine. Beneath it, a date, November 1st, 2011, and next to it, a small cross. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked. He didn't smile. "When the time comes, no one will call it a joke." Then, out of nowhere, the TV behind me flickered on. A short burst of static, and then the screen displayed an image that made me freeze. It was a photo of St. Augustine Chapel, the church where I attended as a child. A church that had burned down 10 years earlier, and Father O'Connor had died in that fire. After that morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Father O'Connor, the list, the dates, it all kept spinning in my mind. I knew I had to find answers. The first place I went was the archive room at the Ruston Public Library. Among old newspaper clippings, church bulletins, and town records, I found the file on St. Augustine Chapel. It showed that the church had burned down in 2001, and that Father O'Connor had died in the fire. Yet, in the corner of the file, a handwritten note read, "All Saints' Day, names to visit," dated November 1st, 2001. The handwriting was elegant, almost ceremonious, like a priest had written it. I then spoke with elderly locals to see if anyone remembered him. Mrs. Eleanor Briggs, a lifelong resident, recalled O'Connor vividly. Every All Saints' Day, he would visit each person on his list, always with a list in hand. When I told her he had appeared at my door that morning, her eyes widened. But he died in the fire. The dates, the names, the handwriting, everything matched perfectly. I felt a chill run down my spine. After returning home, strange things began happening. Lights flickered at random, doors creaked open by themselves, and a faint smell of incense lingered in the air with no source. Reviewing security camera footage, I saw a shadowy figure appear in the corner of my living room, stand motionless for a few seconds, and then vanish. I studied the list carefully. Some names belonged to people long deceased. Others, like me, were still alive. Yet all had experienced unusual phenomena on past All Saints' Days. Whispers, fleeting shadows, vivid dreams that felt real. It was then I realized the truth. Father O'Connor wasn't bound by life or death. He followed the list, moving through time to each name, whether they were alive or gone. And now I understood. With growing dread, it was my turn. That evening when I returned home, the air felt heavier, almost alive. The silence of the night seemed to breathe. Every corner filled with shifting shadows. Past midnight, the TV flickered on, showing only static. Then I heard a soft tapping from the back room. The door was slightly ajar. I wanted to step back, but some invisible force compelled me forward. And then I saw it. A tall, black-robed silhouette standing in the corner. Father O'Connor. Yet he was dead. Burned in the fire. It was impossible. His eyes were milky white, his face serious, almost serene. He extended the list toward me and whispered, "The time has come, Daniel." My heart raced uncontrollably. I wanted to retreat, but my legs felt frozen. A faint breeze stirred, candles flickered, shadows danced. The only sound breaking the silence was the nearly inaudible tap of his feet on the floor. "You must listen," he whispered. "To refuse, to ignore the calling, is dangerous." Suddenly, the lights went out, leaving only his silhouette visible in the dark. Then, he smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It rippled through the room like a chilling wave of sound. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Panic surged, yet a strange pull kept me rooted, as if I had to watch, had to understand. Hours passed in that tense, silent darkness. By morning, a thin, persistent unease lingered. When I checked the list again, a new mark had appeared. My name, the cross beneath it more pronounced than before. And I understood, with a cold certainty, Father O'Connor had returned, a force beyond life and death. The game had begun, and I had no choice but to play by his rules. That night, sleep was impossible. Every corner of my apartment seemed filled with O'Connor's presence. The lights flickered on their own, shadows slid from room to room. Silence no longer offered comfort. It suffocated me. Close to 2 a.m., I heard a tapping, heavier, more deliberate than before. The sound approached, like a living presence coming closer. My heart pounded as I rose from my chair, every step feeling heavier than the last. Then I saw him, a silhouette in the darkness, different from before, his face half shrouded in shadows, eyes glowing a piercing white. He extended his hands toward me, and the list shot from them, landing on the floor. The paper trembled violently, moving as if alive. "Daniel, I warn you," he said, his voice echoing through every corner. "Ignore this. Refuse. And the cost will be great." Suddenly, a wind swept through the apartment. Windows rattled, objects lifted, books fell from shelves. Phones, televisions, computers, all turned on simultaneously. Screens displayed old photographs, the charred St. Augustine Chapel, Father O'Connor's face, and the parishioners who had died in the fire. Panic surged. I found myself pinned to the floor by some invisible force. The figure of O'Connor pointed to another name on the list, then slowly turned back to me. "Next is you." I realized then this was no ordinary visit. It was a warning, a test. If I failed, the consequences wouldn't remain in my mind alone. My body would feel them too. Darkness, cold, shadows, whispers. Every room had become a nightmare. Hours passed without silence. Doors opened and slammed, glass cracked. I held my breath while recording every movement, every sound. By morning, the list had changed again. My name was there, the cross beneath it now, a deep, vivid red. It had begun. Father O'Connor's trial had started, and I was not alone in this supernatural nightmare. That morning, when I looked at the list again, my heart nearly stopped. The red cross still glowed beneath my name. Father O'Connor's trial had begun. There was no turning back. Throughout the day, the atmosphere in my apartment remained heavy. Shadows moved with every step I took. Whispers echoed from the walls. My phone rang on its own. On the screen appeared an old photograph. O'Connor's burned face, eyes staring directly at me. It felt as though the image was imprinted straight into my mind. By evening, the silence had become unbearable. There was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there he stood, Father O'Connor, clad in his black robe. The list hovered in the air, the names trembling as if alive. His eyes locked onto mine, his breath reverberating throughout the room. "Daniel, you must make your choice. Accept it or refuse, but you will bear the consequences," he said. In that moment, I realized resisting could be deadly, but accepting meant stepping into the unknown. My heart pounded violently. Shadows stretched and twisted. The air grew icy. Objects floated around me. Books, papers, even lamps moved, as if the apartment itself were alive. I took a deep breath. Slowly, I picked up the list and read my name aloud. O'Connor's silhouette stepped back, as if acknowledging my decision. Suddenly, everything returned to normal. The lights steadied. The silence settled. Yet in my mind, an echo remained. His eyes were still watching. Since that day, every All Saints' Day, a faint unease lingers. Even without seeing the list, I know he is still observing. Having passed his trial, I now live with both fear and respect. But sometimes, at night, when a soft knock taps at my door or a strange rhythm of wind stirs the room, I can still feel his presence. This is a reminder, a warning, and in my opinion, proof that the trial was real. The story ends here. Yet any viewer should understand. Some trials may seem complete, but shadows and spirits never truly disappear.